Ooh, another white boy with a podcast. Pronouns, Jim Bro. Another white boy with a podcast. You want to see the video? It went viral.
Hi Gains Gurus and welcome to TMGP, the Muscle Growth Podcast, episode 15. I am your host, Roscoe, and today we are welcoming Max Coleman onto the show for part 2 of his 2-part series. Max Coleman, a Lehman College graduate and lecturer, is a passionate researcher who delves into how training variables affect muscle hypertrophy. His love for science, muscles, and cooking is evident in his work, making him a valuable scientific advisor at Built with Science. Max Coleman's research at Lehman College is not just about understanding muscle growth, but also about optimizing it through practical strategies. His work explores the mechanisms of muscle hypertrophy, the impact of different training variables, and the role of nutrition. By focusing on topics such as periodization, training volume, and recovery, Coleman's findings provide actionable insights for individuals, athletes, and fitness enthusiasts striving to achieve their muscle growth goals. Max Coleman has been featured in various podcasts and videos discussing topics related to muscle hypertrophy and resistance training research. These podcasts delve into the science behind muscle building, training techniques, and research findings in the field of resistance training. Additionally, Max Coleman collaborates with Professor Brad Schoenfeld, a renowned figure in exercise science, on studies focusing on muscular adaptations and maximizing muscle hypertrophy. In today's episode, we can look forward to insights from Max related to his research studies and vast knowledge using science to drive muscle hypertrophy gains. Max boasts one of the highest ResearchGate paper read counts that I have ever seen, so you can rest assured that he knows a thing or two about muscles. Given that brief glimpse into Max's remarkable background, let's jump right into the show. Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. And just to circle back to the spectrum of rep ranges, you mentioned maybe it's best to use a wide variety of rep ranges. Is that range, I think I saw Professor Schoenfeld said something about 5 to 50. Is that still what
5 to 30 is the very 5 to 30 is the very often recommended range.
Mm-hmm.
But the range is actually bigger than people think. I mean, we've seen studies demonstrating large amounts of muscle growth from sets of 3. We've seen studies showing large amounts of muscle growth from sets of 100. So
oh wow,
there's so the range is much bigger than people often give it credit for. I think 5 to 30 is a really good pragmatic range.
Sure.
Just because doing a set for 30, that's a pretty tough set, and most people are cutting off those sets not because they're actually getting super close to failure, but because the muscle fucking hurts. It's super painful to do a set of 30, and so you're like, oh shit, fuck, stop. That's usually why you stop doing those, as opposed to your muscle literally cannot contract anymore. My general takeaway with respect to rep ranges is that the majority of what you do should probably be in that, as cliche as it is to say, bodybuilding range of 8 to 12. The majority of the work I do is anywhere between 8 and 15 or something like that. That's where I spend most of my time. And then I'll sprinkle in some work in the 20 to 25 range, and then a little bit of work in the 5 to 6 range as well. But like I said, the majority of my workouts are in the 8 to 15 rep range.
Okay, so you would suggest keeping it in that typical bodybuilder range, but also going up to 25, 30 for maybe isometric or not isometric, for isolation exercises would be a good way to do it, and then maybe a little bit 5 to 6 range for maybe the bigger compound movements.
Yeah, and to be honest, I wouldn't classify it that way. There are certain exercises that man, I don't really use the terms this is so semantic, and this is just me being a pedantic asshole because this is my job. But I wouldn't ever even say a compound or isolation movement, just because those terms are they're conflated when you actually start applying them. So for instance, look at a stiff-legged deadlift.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, is that a compound or an isolation movement? I mean, there's only one joint moving.
I'd say it's
You know what I
compound though. But yes, I guess.
But exactly. Like, no one's calling a stiff-legged deadlift an isolation movement.
Sure.
Even though what it means to be an isolation movement is one joint moving.
Yes.
When in reality, but that's not, no, you know what I mean? So, like, for instance, it wouldn't be like but yes, just for like me not being an asshole, essentially, yes, I would generally perform most of my compounds in the like 5 to 6 range, and then more of those, if I'm doing something in the 20 to 30 rep range, it's probably going to be an isolation movement.
Okay, no, brilliant, and I like that. I like your advice, and definitely be an asshole. You need to.
Okay.
People need to know. This is already going to be an explicit episode, definitely from the start.
Yeah. Also, I apologize, but I have no filter.
That's perfect. We have settings for a reason, and this one will be set to explicit. Brilliant.
Okay, perfect.
You'll be joining Dr. Milo Wolf as well as
okay, sweet.
Dr. Pack. You the three of you are all explicit. So there we go. Let's move on to your paper on. Sorry if I butcher it, but myoelectric activity during electromagnetic resistance alone and in combination with variable resistance or eccentric overload. Is that EMG or ECG, or is that what that is?
EMG.
Okay.
EMG. ECG would be for the heart, or EKG, depending on what part of the world you're from.
Okay.
I think EKG is the German, and ECG is the non-German. I don't know. And it doesn't matter. Yes, that's electromyography. So that's just the EMG of the biceps muscles and the front delt, actually, during eccentric overload, variable resistance, or just dumbbell bicep curls. That study is not really. It's great. It's a great study, but it's just like, there's not a whole lot to take away from it because EMG doesn't really tell us much in general, and we also didn't see very large differences in EMG activity across the muscles from different exercises. So I wouldn't say there's a whole lot to gloss over there, or there's not a whole lot to really discuss with respect to that study.
Okay, but just on the point of the EMG, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just on that point, I see a lot of influencers like Ryan Humiston. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. I know Jeremy, not Etier. You said there's a better way to say it.
Jeremy Etier, I think is
Jeremy.
Pronounce it. Yeah.
Jeremy Etier. They all have lots of videos on EMG studies, and then basically based on those studies that they did, they say therefore this is the best exercise to do. Would you not agree with that, or would you say that there is some substance to that, or would you say that EMGs are not a great way to pick the best exercise for muscle growth anymore?
EMG is not in any way a good way of going about choosing an exercise for muscle growth. It is not at all. EMG shows higher activations and amplitudes at shorter muscle lengths, which we know is probably not good for muscle growth. Plus a bunch of other studies where you'll see higher EMG activity at certain muscles for certain exercises, but then you have another study showing that one with lower amplitudes actually grew the muscle more, or there's no difference at all. Like, for instance, my dear friend Danny Boy Plotkin, D-Money Plotkin, his glute study where he was examining the EMG amplitudes of the glutes during the hip thrust and the squat showed differences, but no differences in end glute growth. So, like, I mean, it's just, there's not, like, using EMG to predict which exercises are going to be better for muscle growth is a fool's errand.
But why are science-based athletes and fitness influencers making these videos? And is it just it's easy? You can see where the thing or whether I
think it sounds scientific. Like, I know Jeremy did it for a long time, and I think he stopped doing so. Like, I know Jeff Nippert did for a long time and stopped doing so. But like, I think that it just, one, you might not know any better. Like, it sounds, activation. Why wouldn't that mean, stimulation and muscle growth, right? But it just doesn't seem to comport with the best evidence that we do have with respect to muscle growth. So, if you see an influencer saying that, like, you should choose this exercise because there was higher EMG activity,
just think again.
No, take that with a grain of salt for sure.
I get you. Okay, no, well, that's super interesting, and that might not have been from your paper, but thank you for that little
of course
tidbit. Okay, this is a cool one. I think you'll probably like this one. I hope you like all of them. I'm sure you probably didn't, but let's pretend like you did. Alterations in measures of body composition, neuromuscular performance, hormonal levels, physiological adaptations, and psychometric outcomes during preparation for physique competition.
Oh, yeah. So this was the case series that we did looking at individuals. It was a series of case studies that we took looking at bodybuilders getting ready for competition. There you go. There's not a whole lot to take from there, but basically that, yeah, like individuals, the one really interesting thing that we did see is that male bodybuilders did lose substantial amounts of lean tissue in preparation for bodybuilding competitions, but the female athletes that we followed, or at least that were in those case studies, did not lose any muscle mass or lean tissue in preparation for competition, which is really interesting. But again, that's like a case series, so not necessarily something that we can take a lot of takeaways from with respect to how we go about training.
Why do you think that there were such profound differences between male and female?
It might have something to do with adiposity. So like females for competition just generally get down to like, I believe it's like 10 to 12% body fat. And males generally get down to like 3 to 5% body fat for competition. And there might be something about getting down to such low levels of body fat that you necessitate the use of, or you necessitate muscle loss essentially by getting so lean. But that's just a theory. Like we can't be absolutely confident as to why males were losing muscle, but females weren't in that.
I think what your guess or hypothesis makes perfect sense. So you reckon that Ronnie Coleman, I think, please forgive me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was maybe Ronnie Coleman who said that he was negative 0.2% body fat.
No, he said he was 0.3% body fat.
0.3.
And then Joe Rogan was like, you were less than 0% body, like as if he'd never heard someone use a decimal before. But no, I'm skeptical that Ronnie Coleman was 0.3% body.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so like, but you know, Ronnie Coleman might have lost muscle tissue getting very close to competition. It's hard to say with respect to the use of anabolics and how those might impact muscle loss or muscle growth during periods of competition.
Sure, but can you like not that he's a realistic guy, but he's just one of those insane athletes. But surely is there not like a lower limit before you kind of, I guess, die in terms of your fat? Like you have to have, isn't 2% the minimum amount that you can have?
Yeah, so there are like there are limits of body fat where if you go below that, like it can be fatal. Obviously, you require fat for energy production within the human body. So like if you go below a certain level of body fat, it absolutely poses some serious danger. And we see that like in the literature, right? Like there are certain activity, or it's not certain activities, but certain things you just see very largely perturbed when you experience RED-S or relative energy deficiency syndrome, right? They're like for instance, females will lose, like, they'll experience amenorrhea where they lose their menstrual cycle as a result of low energy availability. And if you sustain that for very long periods of time, it can pose some serious health detriments to you, like lowered bone mineral density, as well as a bunch of other issues as well. So bodybuilding is not the safest way of going about living life, obviously. And individuals who compete in bodybuilding will be the first people to tell you that, obviously, that if you want to be healthy, don't compete is a very common phrase in all sports, not just bodybuilding, but when you're doing something for athletic competition, sometimes you have to make sacrifices to your health. Now, it's important to point out that these sacrifices that you're making to your health, they're transient. And it's unlikely that they're going to leave very long-lasting effects just being super lean for a few weeks or months in preparation for a bodybuilding competition. But if you were to sustain that for very long periods of times, that's when it can be some serious issues. Like with individuals with anorexia nervosa, there's obviously issues associated with that with respect to health and longevity.
Absolutely. No, you make a fantastic point, especially with regards to it probably not being like that bad for your longevity in the long run. Like we look at Arnold, it probably wouldn't be good to be his size or anything forever. But like you mentioned, it's probably hopefully transient, and you can get back to regular body fat percentage and still have a good life after not having a good life while you're in prep, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, there's some evidence to suggest that like the fluctuations in body weight going from heavy to light to heavy to light may in of itself have some sort of negative health consequences. It's hard to say if those fluctuations within a much more narrow range, because I think that the evidence we have is on obese individuals. And so it's not, we can't confidently say that same thing would occur in individuals that do like bodybuilding, where they're going from like normal body fat levels to extremely low body fat levels. But there's at least some reason to believe where that might pose some health issues.
Absolutely. And I think so the next one is probably something that we must just really quickly touch on, because it's probably just for the nerds like yourself and me. I saw you have an impressive 29,000 reads on ResearchGate or so.
Oh, wow.
Completely
I don't think I knew that until right now.
Well done on that. So that means you did your research pretty thoroughly. But anyway, the next one is the Smart LD tool that made.
Dude, all I'll say about that is that we could have called that the Smart LSD tool, and we botched the opportunity to do so.
Oh yeah,
next time. It's the we'll see. We'll see. It's not too late yet. But basically, so that's a tool that we use for assessing the quality of resistance training studies. So the whole purpose of that is to use that. We would like for that to become the standard that people use when writing meta-analyses for resistance training studies. But there's a lot of work to be done. That's just it's not really a study in of itself. It's on ResearchGate, but it's not a study in of itself. It's more of a tool and a concept that we're currently working on that hopefully will eventually become the standard tool that people use for assessing the quality of studies when writing meta-analyses in resistance training protocols. That is far and away the nerdiest thing that I've ever worked on by far.
Yes. No, it's super cool. The one question I wanted to ask on that: are you guys going to implement that tool?
We might have used it on the cold water immersion study. I can't be confident about that. I'm embarrassed that I don't remember. I think we might have used it for that in conjunction with the Downs and Black. But I would have to go and check.
Yes, I saw. I did see that. I think you did. I talked with Dr. Pack on that one. That's why we've actually
sweet
that one. For
I appreciate it.
No, but that was also very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
But just on that one, Dr. Pack said he's not sure about sauna. Can you quickly touch on sauna and heat, or also not really sure about it, convinced that it's good or bad?
I don't think I'm not convinced. It's probably not bad. I don't think there's really any reason to believe that doing a sauna post-training would be negative. I don't think there's any data looking at that. I could be wrong. I don't think there's any data looking at heat exposure following resistance training. I could totally be wrong about that. I just don't think that there is.
I think we should do it. Next, since you did.
Yeah, it could be a cool study. People sure as fuck love going into saunas and hot steam rooms and stuff like that. I personally don't. My basic takeaway from heat is that if it's basically Dr. Israel's takeaway as well, is if it's something that calms you and relaxes you and you enjoy it, by all means do it. If not, don't, because there's probably not anything inherently beneficial about it. Like, it doesn't seem to, like those heat shock proteins that people get up, they probably don't pose any real health benefits.
What's that brown
and
as well?
Performance benefits
from
like stimulating.
That's
like
wild.
Okay. It's insane. But if it's something that calms you down, basically anything that calms you down and relaxes you is probably good for muscle growth and performance, so it's worth doing.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I just wanted to get your quick take on that one. The next one is your sorry, it's not loading here, but your meta-analysis on creatine. I think that's a flippin' cool paper. Let's chat creatine, because that's obviously the most. Please correct me if I'm wrong with anything I do say. I'd much rather have you.
You're about to be right with what it's like. Definitely the most effective supplement.
No. So I wasn't going to say that, but I do believe you, since you're the guy who did the study. But is it true that creatine is the single most studied supplement in the history of all supplements ever? Is that true? Because that's what I've heard. That there's over 500.
Dude, I honestly don't know. I can't say that definitively. I know that creatine is incredibly well researched, but I'm sure there's like caffeine. I'm sure it has hundreds and hundreds of studies on it as well. But like to call it a supplement, like when you start talking about the difference between a supplement and a drug, like it gets a little bite murky. It's kind of hard to say. Like for instance, vitamins. Like there's a bunch of research out there on different vitamins. So like it's really hard to say whether or not like creatine's the most studied supplement ever. It certainly is the most effective supplement with respect to muscle growth and increasing muscular strength. That has been researched. And with respect to that study, there's not a whole lot to say with other than you saw pretty substantial increases in muscle growth, direct measures of muscle growth when individuals were taking creatine, and it seemed to benefit younger individuals more than older individuals. I think the standardized mean difference between all groups was 0.11, like the Hedges G. Could be wrong about that. It might not even be a Hedges G, but either way, the effect size was around 0.1, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. That's like a moderate effect for sure. But if you look at the generalized effect size of resistance training protocols with respect to muscle growth, you expect to see about 0.3. And this is a really incredible analysis by Greg Nuckols that he did for Stronger by Science with respect to our paper. And by the way, Ryan Burke led this paper. I was just lucky enough to be a part of it, fortunately. And Greg Nuckols basically found that like within the first several weeks of taking it, like because of the standardized mean difference being 0.1, that basically is like a 33% faster rate of muscle growth for individuals taking creatine as opposed to not. So they're about 1/3 faster within the first couple of weeks and months of taking it. So I would say that, like he said in the title of his paper, like don't close the door on creatine yet. It certainly seems to be an effective.
Okay, and dosage? What was the dosage?
I think the dosage across all of the studies, I think there was only one study that did 5 grams per day. I think I helped with the coding of the study, so I should be able to remember this. But the general dosing was 0.1 grams per kilogram, which is a relative dose. So there's no studies comparing a relative dose to an absolute dose. But if you take 5 grams a day, you're in the clear. But if you want to get super niche and specific, take 0.1 grams per kilogram of body weight a day, which is to say that I take about 7 or 8 grams of creatine a day, depending on where my body weight is. But usually a standard dose of 5 grams per day is very clearly demonstrated to be efficacious. So you're safe taking the scoop that they give you, but it almost always comes down to 5 grams. But if you want to weigh it out and be weirdly meticulous about it, like the way that
just double scoop
I do, then I guess. Yeah, true. I mean, like it's not. There's one thing you can be certain of is that you're probably not going to take too much. There's like definitely research showing that there's certain individuals that can't synthesize creatine because it's something that we actually make on our own in our body. And there's some data showing that there's individuals that cannot synthesize creatine on their own, and there's a lot of issues with that because your body needs creatine. And they take very high doses and see no negative health effects from doing so. So the one thing you can be confident about is that you don't need to worry about taking.
Sure. And based on what you just mentioned now, is that with regards to creatine non-responders? Because I believe that's something like, again, these are all statistics. You hear them, you see them, you're never sure if they have any validity. Mm-hmm. I read somewhere that there's 20% of the population are non-responders to creatine. Is that correct? Was that complete nonsense?
So I actually don't know the percentage of individuals that are non-responders to creatine. I do know that there are individuals out there that do not respond to creatine, but here's the good news. If you don't respond to creatine, it means you don't need it. It just means that your muscles are already saturated with creatine, and taking it will pose you no additional benefit. So it's not like you're missing out on anything. If anything, it's just saving you like
a couple bucks.
I don't know, like $100. Yeah, it's like so cheap that like saves you like $50 a year. Like it's really not like a dollar a week. But like if you don't respond to creatine, don't be like, oh, I'm missing out. It's just be like, oh, it's nice. I don't have to think about taking creatine because my muscles are clearly already saturated.
Okay. So two questions for you. Do you mind just quickly, I know it's not a quick thing, but if you can quickly and simply summarize the creatine, I guess the pathways and what the effect is on the ATP and muscle energy, that kind of stuff. And then let's do that one first. And then I've got another question after that we can get to.
Yeah, for sure. So your body makes ATP, which is the currency of the human body or the body, and I believe almost any organism, live like fauna, that is. Yeah, fauna. So basically your body makes ATP through 3 general pathways, right? Actually, it's not for, but your body actually has ATP that it stores on hand. So you do have endogenous ATP stores, but they burn out like that upon the onset of exercise. But one of the quickest ways you can make ATP is through the phosphorylation of creatine. Or actually, I think it's dephosphorylation of creatine. Again, once we start talking about like actual deep like metabolic pathways, we're getting outside of my realm of how we can get as jacked as possible. But point is, your body uses creatine to make ATP very rapidly, and it lasts for about the first 5 seconds or so of the onset of maximal exercise. Right. So if you take creatine, you saturate your muscles with more raw materials that you can use to create energy, which allows for greater strength production, greater power production, and ultimately greater muscle growth over the course of weeks and months of training. I don't know if that really answers your question. We can go a little bit deeper if you want, but that's just the general reason why you would want to take creatine, because it allows you to produce energy faster for activities that we use in research.
So is a good analogy saying that if you take creatine, again, this is not guaranteed, but for example, you might without creatine get 7 reps on a bench, whereas with creatine you might get 8, and then that over time. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a great, which is why it ultimately leads to more muscle growth over the course of months of taking it. Yeah, exactly.
And then, next, I heard that creatine is a peptide. Is that correct?
It's a nitrogen-containing compound. It's like it's an amino acid, but it's not an amino acid. So like what creatine is it's an organic molecule. Like that's all I can tell you is that it's an organic molecule. I tried finding this information. It's not superly readily available. I'm sure it is to someone that's much smarter than I am, but I'm not really sure what creatine is other than an organic molecule. And that it contains nitrogen. I don't think it's not an amino acid, but it's like an amino acid. It's not a protein, but it's like a protein. Again, sorry, it's like outside of my realm of expertise. And I'm not even really sure what creatine is, which is super embarrassing to say, given I'm on a meta-analysis that has to do with creatine. But even hearing Dr. Aaron Kandau talk about it is kind of confusing as to what creatine actually is with respect to its molecule.
No,
I can look it up, and I have before, but it wasn't.
No worries. I also struggle to find clear answers, which is why I thought I'd just ask you. It's absolutely not embarrassing at all, and is don't feel.
I appreciate it.
You know more than 99.9% of the population of the world probably on this kind of stuff. So I don't think anyone would fault you for not knowing everything. And the last thing on creatine. I don't know if you saw the study on creatine. So obviously there's so many different types. Everyone always harks on monohydrate being the only type that you should do. Mm-hmm. But I saw a study on HCl versus monohydrate, and the finding of that study was actually that the HCl elicited better. Well, it was the only one of the different creatines that were studied that elicited positive changes in FFMI. In the fat-free muscle, fat-free fat index, yes, in that one, whereas creatine monohydrate didn't actually elicit positive changes in that. It was just a single study, but it was just interesting to note that there was the HCl and the monohydrate, the strength was the same, but the body changes, composition changes were actually better in the HCl versus the monohydrate one. Just again, a single study.
Yeah, I would have to see the study. I can't speak on it without reading the actual study. But that is interesting that there's some data out there suggesting that I think it's creatine hydrochloride is better than creatine monohydrate, because that's just not the prevailing idea. But again, I would have to look at the study itself before I can.
Okay, but the one you guys studied was monohydrate. Yes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the one thing that I can say confidently is even if that study suggests that hydrochloride is better, one, it's way more fucking expensive, and two, we can at least be confident that creatine monohydrate works. The evidence is very clear on that. So even if it does pose an additional benefit, it's not like monohydrate doesn't work. It's just that there might be something out there that works better. But again, I would have to look at that literature to give a more definitive answer on that.
Sure. Totally understand. Thanks for your thoughts on that. And then we're down to the last 4 papers. Super exciting. Are you still okay with time?
Yeah, we're chilling.
Okay, cool. So this next one was the biomechanical, anthropometric, and
the bench press
for the bench.
The bench press study, which basically was just to say that lean tissue, and that was like the best predictor of how well someone was going to perform in the bench press. But that study, again, doesn't have much to do with muscle growth. Shout out Derek Van Avery. It was a great study, but not a whole lot to take away from it. The whole thing we were looking at just to see if there was different predictors of bench press performance. And I think the strongest correlative there was just lean tissue in general.
But I get what you're saying. It's like not related to muscle growth necessarily, but I think it's super interesting that is the finding of it. Not that that's what I totally understand why that makes sense, and that's what I would have predicted. But there's so many people online, and I know we can't use online as a good source of information, but that, or at least without doing some cutting of the duds, I guess. But so many people are saying, "Oh no, strength is completely unrelated to muscle," and I just don't believe that for the slightest, because I don't see a 70-pound or 100-pound dude deadlifting 300 kilograms. I don't think it's possible, and I think there's definitely a positive correlation between muscle size and muscle strength to some degree, and it might
certainly some 70-kilogram man has deadlifted 660 before, right?
No, I said 70-pound or 100-pound.
Yeah, that one.
No, I don't think so. I don't.
It doesn't sound that. Yeah, as I said,
that's crazy. That guy's dots is off the chart.
Yeah. So I think that people who make the claim that muscle size and muscle strength aren't related are entirely wrong. I mean, of course they are. All else created equal, a larger muscle will produce more force than a smaller muscle.
Sure.
Now, that is not to say that muscle size is the predictor of muscle strength, because obviously you can have an individual with way larger muscles whose tendons insert far higher than an individual with smaller muscles whose tendons insert far lower, and that person is probably going to be far stronger than the other individual. Like tendon insertion has a huge impact on ability to produce force, right? Same with like limb length and other anthropometry. But to say that muscle size has no impact on muscular strength is fucking crazy. There's a reason.
Crazy.
Yeah, there's a reason why there are weight classes in powerlifting, and to say that there shouldn't be would be great. There's a reason there's a DOT score and a Wilks score.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason we have allometric scaling in like when we're measuring and comparing individuals across strength measures. Like, yeah, I don't know, man. That's
no, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. So I don't know quite what you were referring to with regards to the I think you said tendon to muscle.
Yeah.
What?
So like your tendon insertion, right?
Yeah.
Where your muscle actually inserts on the book. Because remember that all muscles do is pull bones closer to one another.
Sure.
That's it. Or I guess further apart from one another, depending on the muscle itself, right?
Sure.
But all they do is pull on bones. That one we can definitely say. So where that muscle inserts on that bone can have a huge impact on the amount of force it's able to produce. And this just makes a lot of sense, right? Unfortunately, humans are all type 1 levers or type 3 levers. I can never remember. It's so embarrassing. I know that our like necks and our calves are type 2 levers, but aside from that, I always get it confused if our muscles are all type 1 or type 3. It doesn't matter. Point being, where the muscle inserts on the bone obviously is going to have a big impact on force. So I'm going to stand up and I'm going to...
Go for it.
You're not watching. My bicep inserts right here, right?
Yeah.
And so in order to produce force to move something, right, I'm at a huge biomechanical disadvantage where the muscle itself has to produce a ton of force because it's moving such a long lever, right?
Yes.
However, if my bicep inserted here, it would have to produce a far less force because the moment in which it's acting on is far smaller, or the lever that it's acting on is far smaller, right? A really easy way of picturing this in your head is look at a door, right? The way the doors work, the handle is on the opposite side of the hinge that the door operates on, right? And if you take that handle and move it to the middle of the door, that door is then much harder to open and close than it would be originally, right? So that's what I mean by tendon insertion can have a huge impact on someone's ability to produce force. That's it.
So is that very similar to like limb length and that kind of thing? It's the same biomechanics at play?
Similar, Yeah, it's similar in that like a taller. There's a reason all the best powerlifters are not very tall individuals. Like there are very few powerlifters who are very tall. You know what I mean?
Damn it.
So like they just don't have to the amount of distance in which they have to traverse the implements that they're using is far lower than someone who has much longer limb lengths. It's a little different because even though the limbs are longer, you could say that the insertion points are the same. And then it gets confusing because usually taller people have they have more sarcomeres in series. So that allows for greater pull on the levers that they're operating on. It gets murky and it extends beyond my understanding of biomechanics and functional anatomy. But yeah, this is all to say that there's a lot of things that impact strength other than muscle size. Like for instance, your brain can literally just be better at telling your muscle what to do than another person's. Like that's just truly a thing. But to say that muscle size has nothing to do with muscular strength it's just not in any way.
I get you. Okay, moving on to the last three. So this next one is the muscular adaptations in drop sets versus traditional training.
Yeah. Meta-analysis that we ran through Lehman, and we just compared 5 studies comparing drop sets to traditional straight training, so like just training with minutes of rest in between sets. And we found no differences in muscular strength or muscle size when comparing those two groups. There's some caveats, especially to the strength, in my personal opinion. Like, I don't think that's a really good... I don't think that you should use drop sets if you're trying to get as strong as possible. But we did see that there were big differences in the amount of time that it took. So basically, the takeaway from that study was, if you're someone who's short on time, but you want to get maximally jacked, well, guess what? You can do drop sets and not worry that you're going to be missing out on any gains because... like even if you're limited on time, you can get super jacked using drop sets. Like that's the big takeaway from that paper. However, I would say that if you're looking to get maximally strong, drop sets is probably not your best bet.
Okay. And that probably goes nicely, or maybe not the strength part, but it's related to the size, I guess, for the progressive overload study without progressing load. So I guess, sorry, I didn't read that one, but I guess that's increasing repetitions leads to similar outcomes as to just increasing load in a double progression kind of manner. Not that that's what the study was about, but that you can do either or both.
Yeah. So everyone's going to do both. Obviously, like you're going to stick to a rep range. Yeah. You're going to stick to a rep range, and once you get outside of that rep range, you add weight. And then if you are on the lower end of that rep range, you just hopefully continue adding load or reps. Sorry. But yeah, the findings from that paper are essentially like, you can get jacked increasing reps or increasing weight over the course of at least 8 weeks, and you don't need to worry about not being able to add weight to the bar week to week. The other good thing about that paper is like a takeaway is like if you're someone who's limited on weights for whatever reason, let's say you're training at home for a couple of months, you can be pretty confident that as long as you're providing some sort of a stimulus, so you don't have to worry that you're not adding weight to the bar week to week to week.
Sure. That's really cool and very useful for people that are stuck at home or at a limited gym and things. You make it sound like it's obvious to increase load and reps. My girlfriend experienced a personal trainer for 3 months, a very expensive one, very good, very jacked guy, and he clearly knew some things. And he didn't let her go up in weight for 3 months on any exercises. She got a bit stronger, but then plateaued because she wasn't allowed to increase weight at all, which I found completely ridiculous. And I said, no, we need a new personal trainer or something, because it was a weird one. And I know technique and stuff's important, but technique on like a cable curl kind of thing, like you can probably go up from the lowest weight at some stage after a month or two.
Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. Like
it was. I don't know if
your girlfriend was paying too much for
way too much.
Unfortunately,
way too much.
Sounds like.
I think it was that vibe of she probably said, I don't want to get too bulky, and then he's like,
yeah,
you don't get too bulky if we don't go up.
But it turns out that will make you just as bulky, according to the Daniel study, at least the progressive overload study.
Okay, what do you mean? What the
like? My point is, like, she was like, I don't want to get too bulky, so we're not going to add weight to the bar. But it seems like as long as we're providing some sort of muscle growth stimulus, meaning even if we're just adding reps to the bar, it's going to grow the same amount of muscle. So like that's not doing you any favors either if you're worried about getting too bulky. Just in general though, women, don't worry about getting too bulky. I've been lifting for 12.
Not going to happen.
I would give anything to be too bulky.
No, I get you.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? It's just not something you need to worry about.
It doesn't happen by mistake. It's like not driving your car because you're worried you're going to become an F1 driver. Or not.
Yeah, it's insane. It's like, I don't like, it's like if you wake up one morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, what the fuck? I'm like 20 pounds heavier and jacked. Like, they'll be the first person that ever had that problem. Yeah. They'll be the first person that's ever happened to. Muscle growth is an incredibly slow process. So you're not just going to wake up one day and be quote unquote too bulky.
And like you mentioned, like if you are too bulky, just stop training for a month or two and you'll lose all of it. But don't do that. Please don't do that. I'm not recommending anyone do that. But
of course.
If that is...
If there is someone out there who just grows muscle too quickly, like they're not listening to podcasts about how to get more...
I get you. That's fair enough. I get you. All right. I think the last one I have here is the loaded interset stretch. Do you want to quickly chat about that one before we get to our closing stuff?
Yeah, sure. So that study was interesting in that we just took 25 individuals and had them perform calf raises on one leg and just normally. And then on the other leg, they performed calf raises and then did a 20-second stretch after they went to failure. So really not a huge, there was really no differences between groups. The only difference is that we saw 1 millimeter difference of growth in the soleus muscle from the individuals doing an interset stretch. I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into that, to be quite honest. I mean, there's something to stretch-mediated hypertrophy, but there's no downside. Like, aside from it being really fucking painful. I mean, the subjects were really uncomfortable when they were having to do that. But aside from that, there was really no downsides to doing the stretch. So, like, it's not going to kill you to do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing to do that. But it's probably not going to make a giant difference with respect to how much muscle you're going to grow.
No, I get you. And it sounds like you're not recommending it at all.
So I'm not recommending it, right? Like, it's not going to hurt you, meaning like it's not going to force gains. Well, it's going to be painful, but it's not going to hurt you. Like, it's not going to like cause damage or anything like that. And it's not going to result in less muscle growth. If anything, it'll result in a very slight increase in muscle growth, but one that's like probably not even detectable by the human eye, even over the course of like a training career. So not something that I think is like absolutely necessary by any means.
Okay.
And that was in untrained subjects. So if there was that small of a magnitude of effect in untrained subjects, then trained subjects have been doing calf raises for several years. Like, man, I seriously doubt that you're going to see a difference.
Okay. No, fair enough. Cool. Well, thank you for going through all your papers on ResearchGate. Sorry, besides the ones we missed that we previously chatted about with Dr. Pack, like the cold water immersion, and then any other ones that I missed. Sorry about those. But thank you again. Like, you gave such cool overviews. Let's get to the, I guess, closing kind of questions. All right. Imagine you're on a space mission to Mars. And due to limited memory space in your spacesuit's workout module, you can only select 10 exact exercises to maintain your muscle size. It can be any exercise, but you have to be specific with your instructions. For example, you can choose overhand wide grip pull-ups as a single exercise, and then close grip skull crushers on an easy bar as another exercise. What 10 exercises are you choosing?
So probably a incline dumbbell bench press. If we're being super specific, probably somewhere between 30-degree incline and 45-degree incline, probably closer to the 30. For back, probably do something like a close grip lat pull down would be ideal. And then also something like a bent over Smith machine row to my knees. That way we're just hitting all of the muscles in the back that we really care about. And then for my delts, I would do probably a cable lateral raise with the cable set to the height of my hand. For my quads, I would probably do a front foot elevated Smith machine lunge and a leg extension of some kind with the seat leaning all the way back and the resistance curve favorable to the length and portion of the exercise. For the hamstrings, I would probably do a seated hamstring curl. For the biceps, I would probably do a seated curl with the cable behind my back, so sitting like this, and the cable at the height of my hand like that. Would probably be the bicep exercise I did. For triceps, it would be the seated overhead barbell tricep extension. So just sitting like this and tricep extension like that with my back supported. Abs, cable crunch, and I think that's it. I would just hope that my calves would stay the size they are just from walking around, essentially.
Sure. No, I get you. No, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. That's all you got your 10 in there. And you mentioned the long length position. Is that what you're trying to get for most of your exercise as well? Do you do long length partials in your training?
For sure. Yeah, I do length. I do a lot of length and partials in my training, and I do the majority of my work. If it's not a length and partial, it's probably an exercise that biases the lengthen portion of an exercise.
Sure. That bicep one you mentioned, is that the seated behind the back Bayesian curl?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There we go.
I call them seated Alberto curls because Alberto Nunez was the first person I ever saw do that exercise. But you're right. Yeah. Seated Bayesian curls would be what they're like actually called.
Super cool. No, that's awesome. That's perfect. And then you mentioned calves. You'll hopefully get enough gravity on Mars.
Yeah, exactly. Just hope that me walking around will keep my calves the size that they are.
Exactly. Okay, brilliant. And then closing thoughts, what advice or parting words of wisdom do you have for our listeners who are looking to embark on their own journey of muscle growth?
Yeah. So one, I would say that, look, we just spent the last fucking 2.5 hours, who knows, just talking about all of the very specific and niche studies that I've been a part of with respect to how we can optimize resistance training to get as jacked as possible. But if you're looking to just embark on your own fitness journey and you're looking to get maximally jacked, follow the 3 tenets of lifting for muscle growth, and you will see the majority of the gains that you probably care about. Your grandma won't be able to tell the difference between you doing that and you following like a real, like, meticulous training program, which is to say, like, there are a fuck ton of roads that lead to Rome. So find the things that you actually enjoy, assuming that they adhere to these 3 principles. Those being, you're training with somewhere between 10 and 20 sets for each muscle each week. You are taking each of those sets at least somewhat close to failure, hopefully somewhere between 3 and 0 reps in reserve. And you're choosing exercises that actually stimulate the target muscle that we're interested in. So basically, you're not doing squats for your hamstrings.
What? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Those are like, seriously, that's like, that would, you follow those 3 things, you're going to see like probably all the gains that you care about in your lifting journey.
I get you. No, and those are absolutely fantastic. I don't think it gets better than those 3 tenets. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the work that you do. And do you have anything on the horizon that you're allowed to talk about, or is it all top secret?
No, nothing's top secret. We got a bunch of cool studies coming out of Lehman's lab here soon, which I'm really excited about. We've got one on technique that's going to be really exciting this summer. My dear friend Ryan Berg is conducting one on supersets right now, which is going to be really great. And then me personally, I'm just going to keep dipping my toes into research, and I'll keep just making cooking videos on Instagram of me talking about lifting while I do it. So nothing super crazy on the horizon other than a bunch of cool studies coming out that I have my very little part I don't know how to say this, very little part in, though I'm trying to help in any way that I can. So be on the lookout for research that's coming out of Lehman's lab soon, and keep your ears to the door in general, because again, this field is so new that shit is changing constantly. So definitely keep your ear up, because things are changing quickly. And if you're not up to date on research, you're going to be wrong about something here soon.
Absolutely. So once again, thank you so much for your time. Do you want to just drop your social media so that people can follow, like, subscribe, all that stuff?
Of course. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, which is like definitely the platform that I'm most active on, which just at Coleman et al, which is COLEMAN.et.al. And then I also post basically the same things on YouTube and TikTok, which are just shorts of me, again, just cooking and talking about lifting while I do it. So really nothing that crazy there. But yeah, aside from that, and for the like true nerds out there that actually care, like ResearchGate, you just type in Max Coleman, I'll be the first thing that comes up.
Awesome. Thank you so much once again, Max, and drop him a follow and like, subscribe, all that jazz. And thank you for your time, Max.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man.
Thank you. Goodbye, Gains Gurus. Thank you for listening, and see you on the next episode of TMGP.